So in 2010, Gaddafi, the late Libyan ruler, said something. He proposed that Nigeria should be divided, just like you have India and Pakistan. And in his opinion, that the country should be divided into two halves. So he said it would be easier to have two different nations than to have one that's locked in confusion. And just fast forward to recent years where you have a lot of people suggesting that it is better to have Nigeria divided, and people even suggesting how that breakage should be and how that division should be. And we really have to look at what he's saying and deeply to really understand why he's saying what he's saying. But we have a big problem. Nigerians have a big problem. So for a very long time, history has not really been taught in secondary schools. It's been optional for some time, but most likely nobody cared about it. So most of the population in the country don't really know about their history, don't know about anything that's happened before. They rarely know about past leaders, and that's just tricky. So I was in the bus some days ago. Somebody was asking who is the president of America that was assassinated. And surprisingly, we all knew about it. We all knew about Kennedy. We all knew about John F. Kennedy, who was the US president that was assassinated. And he asked who was the Nigerian prime minister who was assassinated. And we had to take a pause. A lot of people had to take a pause to think about it before we could really respond. This is because we seem to know a lot more about the world than we even know about Nigeria. We just don't know anything about our history. We just don't know anything at all about who we are and what we are. So in that instance, and it is baffling, it is disturbing about how much we know about our country. And while I was looking at a lot of things, I came across this book by Adewale Maja Pierce. He titled this book, a very interesting book, for a very, very creative book. He titled it The Fiction Called Nigeria, The Struggle for Democracy. And I think I've read through this book, 160 something pages, 160 plus pages. And it's been one of the most interesting books I've really seen for a while, coming about and addressing the issue of the differences in Nigeria, the disunity, the corruption. And, if you read this book, you really understand where corruption started, how it started, and why it's so deep in the system. For most of us, we think that corruption just started yesterday, but it's a lie. If you read this book, you get to understand that through history, that there has been corruption in Nigeria even during the colonial rule. In short, everything that you have right now has been kind of built on corruption and lies and propaganda. And there's just so much we don't really know about our country, So I just wanted to take a little time to have that discussion and just trying to explain what really happened before independence. The amalgamation in 1914, what was it like? And why will somebody just come up to say that we are an expired nation, we should break up by 2014? And that's serious. That's a lot. Let's see how it goes. Once again, my name is Jesse Michael Agwam, and I'm very happy to have you here. Don't leave here without really subscribing. Me and the team will be glad to have you subscribe and just ease a new journey. I think this is our first video out on YouTube. We have had episodes on Spotify. We have had audio episodes, but this is our first episode on YouTube, and we intend to be here for a while. Yeah. So subscribe and be part of us as we continue having a lot more conversation from now on in the future. So before 1914, there was no Nigeria. There was no land called Nigeria. We had a lot of different people. We had 240 ethnic groups in the region who were quite independent of each other. They traded with each other. They fought, they negotiated, and they evolved. They were not one nation, and they did not imagine themselves as one, as we have today. We had this Sokoto Caliphate in the north. The Sokoto Caliphate was an Islamic empire that came about after the Usman Dan Fodio Jihad in the north. We had the Oyo Empire in the southeast. It was a powerful political system, and it has checks and balance between the Alafin and the Oyomesi. We had the Benin Kingdom, we had the Igbo societies, we had the Ijo, Tiv, we had the Efik, we had the Nupe, we have the Chukun, Ibibio, and hundreds more. And 250 ethnic groups. And all these, as I mentioned, we have not called any ethnic group in the Middle Belt. That has a lot more ethnic groups than any part of the country. Yeah, so I just like one very interesting story in that in the evolution of Nigeria, and it was the story of King Jaja Opobo, how he was taken. At first, they called him for a meeting on a ship. He refused, and he was threatened. Is that he comes for that meeting, or they come and attack his people and take him out? And so he agreed for a meeting. And when he stepped on the ship, he was taken and he was exiled from his land. So they took a king and just threw him out of nowhere. And while he was away, he was sick. And after years, and they finally allowed him to come back, he died when he returned to his land. And it was a sad story, but it just showed, that's one of the examples of the stories that showed what the British really did in Nigeria, right? So the British involvement in Nigeria began in the 15th and 18th century. The Atlantic slave trade, European powers, including Britain, they traded the enslaved Africans and the coastal kingdoms. Some local rulers participated, others resisted, and some regions were completely destabilized. In 19th century, so in the 19th century, when British abolished slave trade in 1807, they now turned to palm oil because they needed to lubricate machines during the Industrial Revolution, and palm oil became the new gold. And once again, Nigeria was right in the middle of it. So British merchants competed fiercely. The trade grew very chaotic, and violence increased along the Niger River. And we have people like Sir George Goldie, the big man. I call him big man. If you have read through history, he will really understand. This is people actually call Lord Lugard more than Goldie. I don't know why. Goldie was the guy. So in 1870s and 80s, Goldie consolidated British trading firms along the Niger River into one monopoly, the Royal Niger Company. RNC was Goldie's brainwork. Goldie was Lugard's boss. That's something most of us don't even know. There's somebody like George Goldie. So in 1886, the British government granted it a royal charter. This was corporate colonialism, So the British did not colonize Nigeria directly. Nigeria was like the property of RNC, of the Royal Niger Company. Nigeria was the property of the RNC. So the RNC signed treaties, claimed sovereignty over vast territories. The RNC collected taxes. The RNC controlled trade, and the RNC also used military force. This was not about civilization. It was about profits. It was completely business. While France and Germany were expanding in other parts of West Africa, so the British began to fear that they might lose their territory since they were not directly involved in controlling Nigeria. So they feared that if we leave this to a private company, we might end up losing it. So in 1900, the British government revoked the company charter and took direct control. So Britain created two separate protectorates, the Northern Protectorate and the Southern Protectorate. The North had the Muslim majority. The North was economically integrated into global trade. The North had landmass, had the agriculture, but very few infrastructure. The Northerners were not educated. And so the South was most exposed to European trade and missionaries. They had higher literacy rates, they had coastal access, and it was more economically profitable. So the joining between the North and the South It was not to help anybody. It was just to balance account sheets. It was better to have these two parts come together so that we'll be able to use the resources from the South to help the North. It was nothing more than that. It was just like that. You know, so Lord Lugard was the one who was now in charge of the Northern Protectorate. So Lord Lugard, when he went to the North, he saw the existing structure that was already in the North, and he didn't want to step out with that. So he wanted to leave everything as it was. So he ruled indirectly through the emirs. He collected taxes. Um, he conquered places. He did everything he wanted to do indirectly through the emirs. He still left powers to the emirs, but he was their boss. It was like their boss. They had to report to him at some point. So they did a lot of things in the North. One of the things that had been significant that was done in the North was that they kind of somehow neglected access to education in the North, because the North already was majorly Islamic, and Islam has its form of education. So the only thing you had in the North was the form of Islamic education and not the Western education. And the Northerners were, since they were the ones that have hot head, they have gone through battles, the jihad, there was always battle in the North. There was always something to fight for in the North. So even you see that after amalgamation, the Hausas became the major part of the army, and while the Southerners, who were educated, became the clerks, the admin staffs in the offices, and did the paperwork. The Northerners became the soldiers and became the leaders. And that will come about while if you're a Northerner and you go to the South, you'll be seen as, everybody will assume that you're Hausa, And that's one of the reasons, because at some point, majority of the soldiers in Nigeria after the amalgamation were from the North. And the common language that was spoken in that military then was Hausa. But then you had some regions in the North that was different. For instance, the Middle Belt. The Middle Belt had places like Southern Kaduna, Plateau State, who were not really conquered by the jihad movement of Usman Dan Fodio. So the Middle Belt was different. The Middle Belt had more exposure to Western education, because the Middle Belt itself was not an Islamic state. So during the fights with Usman Dan Fodio, the Middle Beltans kind of saw it like a way to preserve themselves by not being Muslim. So they were in opposition of whatever the North is. So Ichiri said that the Middle Belt did not end up being Christian because they really wanted to be Christian. They end up being Christian because it was an opposite religion to what was found in the core North. So they didn't want that to be like the core North. So they accepted Christianity so easily because it was something different than what they have seen, because they have seen what Islam was used to do. They were terrorized, they were slaves, and somehow Christianity was like something that was going to save them. So it was easy. So let's go, man. If this is what's going to save us, let's take it. Let's take this deal. So the acceptance of Christianity brought in a lot of education, and so that's why even up to date you see a lot of Middle Belters who are more educated than the far north, the core northern state. The big question that people might ask is why the amalgamation? And as we said before, the amalgamation was just to balance sheets. The South had the money, the North had the land and the population, and to rule, you need money. So to be able to comfortably weave these things together, you will need money, you need a lot of things. So when Nigeria was fused together during the amalgamation, it was just a way to use the southern resources and to balance up what was deficit in the northern part of the country. Funny part about the amalgamation is that none of the parties involved were consulted. It was not something that they brought the southern part of Nigeria and the northern part of Nigeria together to say, let's talk about this. What is going to happen? This is what we want to do, and what do you guys think about it? Nobody was asked questions. The northerners were not asked, the southerners were not asked. They were forcefully joined together and forced to stay together and forced to understand each other. It's crazy. After the amalgamation, there was a serious problem. You understand? Because the amalgamation did not fully integrate the whole country together. Because we had education systems, we had legal systems, we had cultural structures, we had political ideologies that are quite different from one place to another. Did not have its own political ideology. The South had its own political ideology. But they did something. They not remain governed directly from the South. Christian missionary activity was restricted in the North because of obvious reasons that we have explained, and Western education expanded faster in the South. So by independence in 1960, the South had more Western educated elite. The North had more traditional political consolidation, but mutual substitution grew. So by 1960, for instance, Nigeria had very few universities, I think 2 or 3. And only one of the Nigerian universities as of independence was in the North. And all the rest were in the South. And that to show you the lack of balance that we had. If you had a lot, even up to date, Northern Nigeria has the highest out of school children. It is a problem that has not really been solved, that Northern Nigeria is not educated enough to even compete. The economy is just not educated, So there has been a lot of tension. The colonial system deepened division, census controversies happened, regional politics and ethnic bias on political parties. There has been a lot of chaos, and who really should rule in Nigeria. The Northerners felt that for a long time they are the rightful owners of the states, because for a long time the British has actually used Northerners to rule the government indirectly. So in one sense, like Adewale would say it in his book, in one sense, Nigeria was truly a fiction. It was artificial construction. It was drawn by colonial lines. It was held together for just administrative convenience. It was designed for extraction and not cohesion. So that was it. The amalgamation of 1914 did not create a nation. It created a framework. And over the 20th century, Nigeria have struggled to the 21st century, struggled in terms of trying to negotiate power, who has this and who has that. And based on history, the British themselves didn't want to leave Nigeria when they left Nigeria. The independence we had was kind of premature independence. There was no fight. People just left. It's like they got fed up of a system they created, and the system failed. And they were like, oh, let's get out of this place. This is not working anymore. So they left. And in 1960, we had our independence with a lot of troubles, So the amalgamation in 1814, the amalgamation in 1914 was supposed to have one country called Nigeria that was going to stand for 100 years under the British rule. And even in the book, A Fiction Called Nigeria, Adewale highlighted how the British intended to rule for 99 plus years. And it was not in their intention. I've not seen over all the parts of which we have seen, I've not seen a place where the British intended to leave Nigeria whole like Nigeria, So who knows? Maybe they wanted to have Nigeria as their colonial pop, and then when they are done, they would break the country and give it up. So yeah, we are hoping for the best. We're hoping that this nation will continue to stay as it is, and we're hoping for better things. Yeah. So just leave me your comments. Don't forget to leave a comment on what you think is our first episode. And so far, so good. I think I like the conversation. So yeah, I'll see you again next time, and have a good day.